Hi, my name is Maxim. I'm co-founder of Code.store, and we are three co-founders there, and we are a French-based international low-code agency, not really no-code, and we are growing quite fast in 3 years, doubling our size every year. Now we are around 50 people, and we mainly do large, complex low-code projects for very big, challenging organizations.
What were the beginnings of your agency and why did you choose low code?
So actually, the beginning started a little bit earlier. In 2008, I found a company named Adiax, which was quickly became the European leader in Drupal CMS. So we went pretty much 500 people doing only Drupal, very code, very PHP, doing a lot of internal business apps. And in 2018, I sold the company to a group named Smile in France. And after a year of researching what I should be my next venture, we started Code.store, again, an agency, but with the idea of using only the top-notch technologies, the latest, the most interesting ones. So we specialized in low code because I think this is the latest evolution of the software development, and AI, basically implementing real world scenario, real world usages for AI. So AI and low code now is very trendy, but 3 years ago when we started, it was a little bit um, a crazy idea for large companies specifically we are targeting. So this is how we started. Yeah.
So your story is connected with software and agencies. What were you doing before launching the agency? Maybe this one or the previous one, right? The previous one.
Oh yeah. Um, so before launching all this agency, a I was a developer. I started coding around 8, 9 years old. And then when I was 16, I created a video game named Firecrow, which was a little bit successful. We managed to sell 300,000 copies of it. It was back in 1997, 1998. And then I went to telecom business where we created value-added services, SEEP, telephony, and telecom. Again, as lead software engineer, product engineer, and yeah, and then I left all this and to create Ajax, which was the Drupal CMS agency, and then sold it and to create Code.store. Yeah.
You mentioned the idea behind the the agency is to work with new technologies, including AI. What were the initial challenges you encountered with low code, no code, producing this to the customers to the market?
Yeah, well, the first challenge is the number of these tools because there we tested during the last 3 years. I think we tested around 850 tools, and there are so many of them today. And this is the first challenge: which tool to use for specifically for large companies. It's a bet. And the second challenge, because we wanted to target the largest and the most compelling, the most challenging projects in the world, um, for the largest company in the world, we have a lot of pushback from IT directors, from internal security, compliance, and legal teams because, well, most of the modern low-code platforms are quite young. They are less than 5 years. They're still startups for some of them, and it's very hard for large companies to make a bet on those young companies and young platforms. So yeah, that's the most challenging part: how to convince and explain to the IT directors and to the legal and procurements and compliance and security departments of these large companies that Retool, Xano, FastGen, WeWeb, Webflow are the right choices, and not OutSystems, not Mendix, not Salesforce, and not Microsoft Dynamics, for example.
Can you describe any milestones you've reached so far with the agency?
Well, as I said, we double the revenue and the headcount every year now. So we are 50. We was 20 25 last year. So The growth is tremendous. We are in discussions on the most interesting projects. Unfortunately, I cannot give a lot of details, but we have, for example, a project with potentially 25,000 end users, internal business application with over um, 5 to 600 screens on the app. So it's a quite impressive app with um, hundreds of millions of database rows, and all built on low code, which is, I think, will be one of the largest and most complex low code projects in the world. Yeah, that's very impressive. This is an example of one of the application, the low code application we are building. So it's an enterprise business application, which has first of all, it's important to say that we are not betting on one tool. So we, for example, in this case, we're going to have the backend will be provided by Xano. Xano is for us one of the best, if not the best, backend as a service platform out there today. And as you may imagine, inside a big enterprise application, you will have a lot of modules, and we'll be dealing around thousands endpoints. So we'll have authentication, we will have probably some kind of project or case management, we will have contract rules, we will have to work with the services, external services and service team that will be field workers that will complete some kind of task, and we will have a lot of validation, financial validation at the end. And obviously, when you're operating in a company where we have thousands and thousands of employees, we have to integrate these backends with a lot of existing software like SAP, digital asset management, product information management, CRM, anti-fraud, BI, invoicing, etc., etc., etc. And on top of that, we have to build front ends, and then we have multiple front ends using multiple no-code tools. For example, internal operator portals or business partner portals or providers portal would be built on Retool, which is probably the best tool to build internal business apps. We are in love with Retool. And for example, for top management or the client portal, we will switch to WeWeb, for example, another front end tool platform we are using too. But it's not all. We also have multiple channel touch points because all these backend APIs could be accessed through email, through chatbots, through third-party websites, through even call centers and stuff. That's why you see this multi-channel touch point on the top of this schema. And finally, some of the part of the modules, so features of this big application would be using extensively large language models, OpenAI and Cohere. Why do we need that? Analyzing contract rules, for example, we can give end users an immediate question and answer interface to check each client contract, how this contract is covering his needs, or is possible to do something or not. And this makes quite a big, quite a complex software at the end, with a lot of integrations, external, internal apps, and several front ends. And let's have a little bit of deep dive of how these low code platforms integrates within large companies' IT architecture. So basically, let's start with Xano and Retool, as I already said. So basically, Xano internally will be executed inside the cloud infrastructure of the client. So bring your own cloud. And inside Xano, you have a cluster of Postgre database, and you have these backend microservices where the API, your business logic, will be living. And then you have, for example, integrated Redis caching system and a tasks manager. Um, on top of that, you will have an Azure management API. So everything is covered with API management, but it might be Kong, it might be APG, it might be Gravity, whatever API gateway you're using. And then on top of that, you will have several portals. Some of them will be inside a demilitarized zone, for example, internal portals, or some of them will be firewalled with external portals. All of them run with retool, for example. And what gives it, it's a very simple horizontal scaling and failover because you can, each retool portal will be inside Docker containers. And on top of that, obviously, you have, as I said, your own cloud. It might be Azure, but it might be GCP or AWS, no matter. And for example, you often have multiple countries inside large organization. So you can duplicate this architecture across different countries with having this central master core, open core model, so countries can still adapt locally some features or some data model to their specifics. And finally, everything will be connected to classical IT services like Active Directory for the single sign-on and for the authorization. We'll have GitHub, for example, because we want CI/CD working even with no code and low code. And for example, data factories or some supervision, alerts, monitoring stuff. And finally, everything can go inside Git. So we have this trail of auditability versioning that is usually required by large companies. And finally, Retool and Xano will still have direct access to this installation, so they can provide you core updates, supervision, audits, and through a remote administration. So basically, this is how could look a very large, complex architecture of low code and no code inside big companies.
From your perspective, how has no-code changed the way we create software? Let's compare it to traditional software development.
Look, first of all, you have to understand from my perspective, from my point of view, that low code, no code isn't at all a revolution. It's an incremental change over the last 80 years of software. So we started like with cheapened wires, and then we got assembler instruction set instead of putting wires, so we can program computers. And then we have compiled languages, so we don't have to write instructions and we can use multiple chips. And then we had in interpreted languages, script in languages executed inside a browser. And then we have frameworks like Laravel, React, and Vue.js and stuff. So we are adding more and more abstraction and more commodity to the software. So now we are at the age of low code and no code platforms. And what basically they change, they makes a commodity of all basic stuff: creating a button, managing a login and logout, managing versioning, deployment, database and front and back end integration. All these are solved issues. We don't have to research or have innovation in that space. So everything that is not creating business logic, really specific to each project, to each software, to each application, all the rest is taken care of by low code. So that means that we basically see today 2 to 5 times fold faster projects. So you can create new software 5 times faster than, let's say, 3 years ago with classical code approach.
Could you provide an example where no-code offered a distinct advantage over traditional software development from your experience, from your projects accomplished?
Well, the easiest example, I would say, take Retool. So Retool basically is a front-end framework, low-code platform. You can create internal business application very fast by combining around 100 ready-to-use components. So if I had to do it in classical mode, I would switch to React. So yes, I have the components library in React. I can assemble them with code, positioning them, and then bind them to the data and stuff. But the difference is, for example, the components are ready to use with a lot of configuration and tested over thousands and thousands of use cases. So when I take a table components, for example, inside Retool is an extremely flexible, configurable table that is automatically filled with all the features like download CSV, pagination, columns, auto adjustments. The presentation of each column depends on the data is inside. all the small details are taken care of. I don't have to think about. I only have to put my table on my screen visually, because it's easier to design visual interfaces visually and not by code, because our brains are visual brains, and and then connect it to queries. And this is the very good thing we see now. It's not everything have to be visual. For example, Bubble, everything is visual, and it's bad idea, Bubble IO, because something is better in code. So in retool, writing queries, SQL queries, or REST API, or GraphQL queries, you write code. So it's a very nice combination of code, where code is better, with visual interfaces, where visual interface is better. So, and everything else is taken care of. I don't have to think about caching. I don't have to think about um, um, binding, updating data when something changed in my interface. I don't have to think about versioning, rollback, and deploying. I don't have to think about costing of that, scaling, and everything is taken care of. So all these stages, like documentation, is also not necessary, because everything is visual. I don't have to deploy it, and I have to set up CI/CD. I don't have to scale. I don't have to set up AWS accounts. Nothing. I just click, click, click. My app is ready. So this is a very concrete example of how it's going really faster with low code.
What about the common misconceptions about no code, especially working with large enterprises? You probably face some of the issues about no code. How do you address them?
Well, for me, the biggest problem of no code is the false promise that was spread across all the spirits at the beginning of this no code platform, is like citizen developer. Like everyone can create software. And this is absolutely wrong, specifically when you talk about real software, not the small apps that takes like Zapier and Make and something. That if you take real software cannot be created by citizen developer if you are not a software professional, because it's still complex process of creating, covering complex business processes with a lot of users, with different user needs, with multiple screens, data models, and stuff. So I think that this is the biggest issue I have in my journey, is that people say, "Oh, no code, no code. Everyone will be developers." No, not everyone will become a developer. Still, software creation is still a complex process requiring software engineers. So we no code doesn't replace low code doesn't replace developers, and we use very little no code actually tools. We use mostly very advanced low code platforms, um, and all of our employees are software engineers. We don't have any builder or maker or citizen developer. All of them are software engineers, going really, really faster with low code tools, but still software engineers. And I think the second problem, the challenge we might face, is often that if you don't select the right platform, you might be blocked, um, because every platform, every tool will have a set of constraints. For example, if you take I don't know, WeWeb, they will have their own constraints. Retool, they have other constraints. So you have to really know the tools to select the right one. And the right choice is to say that I want a tool where I can always switch to code mode. WeWeb, Retool, Xano, all of them offer code capabilities. So if I'm blocked with anything that tools offers, I can switch to code, integrate Lambda function, integrate some JavaScript, um, and the problem will be solved. So for us, at least, very important is that building software with software engineers, even using these low-code platforms. And the second is to to select platforms that can offer you switching to back to code and total freedom.
What are your predictions for the future of no-code development coming years? You already mentioned that from your perspective, it's not a revolution. So are there any trends or technologies that you are excited about it?
I think the AI is everywhere. So the basically what really changed in the last 2 years is that we have two ways to get there. Either is low code platforms becoming more extended everywhere, so more complex, integrating more and more capabilities. And on the other side, we still have coming from code generation with AI, which lets you write in plain English, being a junior software developer and still being able to create quite complex code. I think at some point, this will be joining together, and we already see that Retool, for example, or Xano integrate copilots, AI copilots inside these tools. And we see, for example, front-end generation AI. So I think this is the most interesting part that we'll see. There will be consolidation. Not all the tools will survive, that's for sure. So we will see consolidation, I think, and on the other side, we will see the jointure between the AI trend for generation and the low-code trend. And I think once both of them are joining together, we might get back to the citizen developer again.
What advice would you give to aspiring developers that are interested in the low-code, no-code space? Give one piece of advice why they should start with the no-code, low-code, and one reason why they shouldn't.
I think that every single developer today is a software engineer, and they have to remember he's not a coder or a programmer. He's a software engineer, and the most important world is engineers. So what is the role of a software engineer? Get back to the basics, is to create software that solves some pain points of end users. And how you do that isn't really important, and it changes since 80 years. The girls who wrote code for Apple program wrote very complex instructions, very difficult to read. And today you have low-code platforms or GitHub Copilot or very advanced languages like Rust and Go and Python and stuff. So I would say that it's really important to keep on trends if you're a software engineer, and to know how to create software in the most simple, efficient way. And so low code is part of the solution. SaaS tools, AI, CI, CD, all these cloud platforms, all these offer you different building blocks to create nice software in the most efficient way. And so this is what you should keep in mind. How can I create this software in the most efficient, simple way?
One or two sentences why they shouldn't start with no-code.
Um, well, if you starting with no code will force you to select your preferred stack, and the only risk is that this stack may disappear um, later. This is the problem of young platforms. And also, maybe another direction, if you're more comfortable with, is to look on how you can optimize code generation with AI. I think this is another domain which is quite separated from the no-code, low-code space, which is AI-led code generation, which is still incumbent. It's very young, and not that efficient yet. But I think that this space, how you can generate and translate from languages to languages with AI, might be an interesting part to learn if you don't want to use at all any platforms and you still want to create code. AI, how to communicate, how to work together with AI might be an interesting way of to learn um, for young engineers.